Hi, this is Sue Greenwald with Awakened Stories. I'm here today with KristaLyn Vetovich. Hey, KristaLyn, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. And I met KristaLyn a few years ago at the Empowered Light Holistic Expos. She was a speaker, I think, twice there, if I'm
Mhm.
not mistaken. I
So
can't
yeah,
remember that far back anymore.
it's like a whole other world back then.
But you and I had talked, mostly over the phone or Zoom, and I know we talked once in the lobby at length. But what impressed me about you is you, being so young, have written several amazing books, and just hearing what you had in mind got me excited way back when. So I thought you would be a great candidate for this type of an interview to, help other people along their way.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yay.
no, I view books as a sort of magic and healing modality. So I've really refined why I believe that
Right.
and how you can format books consciously in a way that helps people. I've actually made it my entire career. So
Oh, exciting. I can't wait to hear more about that. So
yes.
what I'd like to do, if that's okay, is talk a little bit about, your childhood, your background, whether you were religious, your belief system, kind of where you were, and if you can kind of walk us through any major events that you might have had that might have woken you up a little bit more quickly, or were you that way right from birth? Kind of give us that rough overview, if that's okay.
Absolutely. And cut me off if I need to keep it briefer, but I'll do my best. So I have had an inclination towards spiritual gifts and psychic abilities my entire life, but I
Right.
was not keen on them for about the first 10 to 15 years of my life because I did have a very religious upbringing. And I loved that about my life. I actually really loved the pursuit of God, of a higher power, of trying to connect with something
Right.
beyond more than what the world looked like. Because that the world as I saw it then was
Right.
really boring and mundane, and I wasn't. So things really started kicking off for me, though, when I was about 9 to 10 years old and got a pretty nasty diagnosis with a neurological disorder called moya moya. Recommend Googling it. It's fascinating. And I needed a surgery, a brain surgery, and I needed to travel for it. And so, as you do when you're growing up in a church, I was on many prayer lists. And in my church, someone came up to me and said they worked on faith healing. And it was very similar at the time to Reiki, but Reiki hadn't
Right.
really gotten its rise yet.
Right. Right.
So this woman approached my family and said, "Do you mind if I help KristaLyn with this energy healing? And hopefully it will help the process of this brain surgery." And it was a life and death situation for
Right.
me.
Right.
So we were just like, whatever works, let's go
Right.
for it. But through this I recognized that, oh, that stuff I see is energy. Oh, this thing I feel is energy. Oh, this place I go when I close my eyes and center myself
Right.
is a meditation in a higher plane, and all these things. And I started being able to consciously access those things, recognizing that that's what they were. And during the surgery, there was this moment where the woman who taught me was on an airplane. We
Mhm.
were in Boston. I was, of course, unconscious because I was having brain surgery performed, and I died. And it was this moment where all the doctors who were working on me through this 10-hour surgery said that they simply had to step back because it was too precarious of a situation. And they happened to mention the time to my family that this happened.
Right.
And it corresponded with a moment when this woman was on a plane reading a book and all of a sudden got a ping that KristaLyn needs energy. And so she wrote down the time and sent me the energy. And that is when I came back unassisted.
Wow.
Because, like, spoiler, I lived. But that was a really big launch for me. And
Right.
then I went through really getting into how can I make this work with my faith? How can I make this permissible in religion? As I think a lot of us go through that point where we acknowledge there are spiritual gifts, but how can I fit that into my faith base, my church, other people's opinions about how I should be practicing my faith, those kinds of things. So I became a Sunday school teacher. I learned by teaching. I've always done that really well, like gaining a more robust understanding through teaching it and the responsibility of being in
Right.
integrity
Right.
with giving information. Um, And eventually I started doing healings with people. I started witnessing healings for people, was able to see a lot of miraculous situations through that. And it became clearer and clearer that like this stuff is where God is at. This is where the divine is. And so it became less church, more one-on-one relationship, and accepting that everything in the world, all the archetypes are expressed in various different ways. And they all, in my view, connect back to a source. But it comes down in this, in the medieval period, they called it the great chain of being. And I really subscribe to that idea that there's this source and then there's thoughts that go out from that. Like we are the story playing out in the creator mind, which I really, of course, love.
Right, right. So would you say before your brain operation that you had, let's call them energetic or psychic abilities or whatever you want. So you had them before the brain operation, but you probably didn't fully embrace them until afterwards, until you realized how real they were.
And I realized what use they were.
Yeah.
So, you know, having them was great, but having these figures come to you at night did nothing but scare me. Having messages come in my head and just knowing things, I thought I was just a cocky little kid who happened to speak too much. Seeing energy in the air, I thought everybody saw it.
Yeah.
Being able to move it or, you know, pick up on things, I thought everybody could. So I didn't talk about it. And when I would, if it was received as weird, that was especially bad. I didn't want to be weird. I wanted to be accepted. So I would keep things to myself.
I think everybody that has those abilities does keep things to yourself, because your family, your friends, your associates will kind of shut you down. Your teachers will tell you that's not true, whatever it might be. And then there's the second part that you mentioned. You have the assumption that everyone sees the same thing that you do. And I kind of had that too. And then of course, when I talk about some things, they'd be like, no. And you get kind of like you want to fit in, so you stop talking about it after a while.
Yeah. Even to this day with my partner, I'll say, is that a just me thing, or is that like an every experience thing?
Yeah.
And so he will help me differentiate even now.
Right. Good.
Yeah.
So after, your brain surgery, and your parents believed that you died as the doctors told them. And then your friend on the plane gave them the time. So it coincided. So there was a bigger, stronger belief there, right? That this is
there
really
was synchronicities. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I always like validations. So if I can get tangible, that is when someone says, why do you believe in a higher power? That's my go-to story, because I had data and I like having data.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a pretty big one,
It's helpful and important for me. So.
Yeah. My first memory was a near-death experience.
Oh, wow.
But so I was like 2 or 3, I don't know how old, and I basically hit my head, and I was a little kid. I flew up and I hovered above the earth for a while, and then I got sucked back into my body. And that's all I really remember at this point. It's been a long time, but I've had a lot of odd experiences my whole life, and they've really accelerated probably the past 20 years or so. I mean, I've had them all my life, but I started writing them down at my daughter's suggestion last year, which has led to these videos and my blog site. Super fun to do, just to remember these little experiences that I've had,
Yeah. And in integrating that information, you're also creating something that someone in the same path as you can benefit from. That's fantastic.
Exactly. And even after I did my first little small blog, I was running around town, and I was telling it to one of my friends, and she said, that happened to me last week. And I thought I was crazy. I'm like, no, that was real. And that, you're not crazy. That happened. It's happened to me so many times. Why would you doubt yourself, So it really helps other people.
Yeah. And it is a journey. Self-doubt is probably the largest thing. And I actually help people write books to heal people. And in part of that process, my business partner and I help them access their intuitive gifts. And so much of this 4-month process we go through, you're writing a book, but you're overcoming self-doubt along the way. The biggest thing.
Right. I'd love to hear more about that. But first, I want to hear more about your childhood. So you have the brain surgery. Did you have other experiences that were significant while growing up?
Yeah. So I, as many people of my generation, unfortunately, got into some not so great relationships. that stunted my growth in that space, because there's nothing as 3D, I guess you could call it. There's nothing as tangible world or dense world as being in a relationship that puts you in survival mode. And so that's where I was for quite a while. And when I got out of that, though, I decided that's it. I am swearing off relationships of all sort until I understand myself,
Yeah.
who I am, what I want to be, what my values are, and what the deal is between me and whatever is going on up here.
Yeah.
So I called it the discussion between the me, myself, and the I am. And I actually reference it in one of my books that I talk about your relationship with the me, myself, higher self, and the I am, that source
Right.
material out there. And so I spent 3 years just doing that and pursuing that, and writing books, doing all sorts of things. And then in that time, I also met someone who was going through diagnosis of cancer.
Okay.
And they just wanted to make it to their daughter's wedding. And they had 3 months and the wedding was in like 4 months. It was one of those situations where it was like, oh, come on. So I had started learning healing modalities. And at this point, I was blending in the different modalities I had learned. And I said, I need practice and this can only help. It can't hurt.
Right.
Do you mind if we work together? So we did. And she was able to dance at her daughter's wedding. And there were several years after that that were really wonderful for her as well. So that was a huge growing experience where I consider her to be one of my biggest mentors, just by allowing me that space to explore.
That's
and
a great story. Yeah.
Lots of validation from that.
Yeah, like I said, again, proving that it's real, that the energy is real, frequencies are real, what you're doing is real. And I think, and I talked about this at one of my expos. At one of our speakers, I said, what is the biggest controller of our society? And he said, I think it might have been video recorded. He said, it's our social structure. We keep each other in line because we're taught that nothing is real, like nothing beyond the material world is real. Okay. So if somebody says, I saw this, or I did this, or I know this, what do we say? You're crazy.
Yes.
We bash them back into the little box that we have in society. So everyone that actually has these skills and abilities, which we all do, but some it comes a little easier to than others, they're afraid to say anything because they don't want to be ridiculed. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a teacher. I actually studied in astrological magic. And so my teacher from astrological magic calls that the atheistic. So God doesn't really factor into the real world. The atheistic, materialistic worldview is our societal worldview. But you can also go to church on Sundays.
Yeah.
But when you leave church, you have to go back into that atheistic, materialistic worldview of they don't intersect. And so breaking that mold and breaking out of that mind set is the biggest challenge. But I was just thinking about this today. When you do, it changes nothing about the circumstances of the world around you, but it changes everything about the perception of the world around you. And that's where the magic really happens.
Yeah. You're reframing your belief system. And what I always say is, we start here, and once you see or experience something, your mind opens a little bit. So you're out here, and as you become more, hey, I don't believe what you're saying, but tell me about it. And then you start to see other things that support that. Your mind grows. You open your mind a little more. And it's never ending. It's always expanding. It's so exciting. Yeah. But yeah. So you helped somebody with cancer, and it was a great success. Right. And so I'd love to know more about what you're doing with astrology right now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's quite a time. So I started developing astrology in 2016. I started practicing and, reading charts for people and really getting involved with that, and started realizing that the worldview that goes hand in hand with astrology really fit an inner truth that I had. And so I kept walking with it, as you mentioned, just expanding a little bit further, a
Right,
little bit
right.
further, until finally, during 2020, I decided to dive straight into, after several years of practicing with astrology, I wanted to understand it more intimately.
Right.
So I went into Astrological Magic, found the best teacher I could find, practiced with that, and it's just been it's my love language is what I call it. Astrology is the way that I can best express to someone how unique they are, how perfect they are, and how much they deserve love, and how much I can see and love them in that way of just a soul and a being knowing and understanding another soul. So I find that in astrology where I can give you proof that you are who you're supposed to be. I call it the universe's or God's stamp of approval is your birth chart. So it's this really awesome experience of saying, hey, this about you. And I knew that by looking at this chart, which means it's okay that you are that way because you were born to be. And there's just so much validation you can find it in. And then you can use it for literally any application you could think of, for magic, for questions, for relationships, for future,
Right.
all those things.
Well, what I found in, with what I do is everyone has their perspective about, who we are. So numerology, astrology, I mean, there's so many modalities that are all accurate, although they have their way of looking at a person. But it just really will give that person greater insight into themselves and kind of validate them a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I view it as it's the same language, but different dialects. We're
Yes,
all
that's a good
understanding
way
the
to
same
say it.
truth. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And of course, again, as a society, we're taught to poo-poo it, or we think the stuff in the newspaper, the Sunday paper or whatever, which nobody reads anymore, we believe that's astrology, and it's so generic. Anyone could fit into that category, right? Where what you're doing is very specific to that person and
Yeah.
very
And
accurate.
yeah, and there are people out there who are really great with the integrity of their sun sign astrology, which is what you'll find in your typical horoscope. And that's not the most accurate approach you could take to a horoscope. I actually do weekly horoscopes on my social media where I use your rising sign because that helps a lot more for the specifics of who you are. It's not as specific as getting an actual reading, but it's a little bit more than sun sign. And
Right.
there are people out there who have gotten extremely skilled in using sun sign as well, since that's what most people will already know about themselves. And it makes it
Right,
just more accessible for them as too,
right.
on
So
top of
what
it.
is how could someone find that social media and how could they find out
Sure.
more about that?
Yeah. So my social media is at the real KristaLyn. So it's my first name, KristaLyn. And it's just the real KristaLyn because believe it or not, there have been imposters. So I ended up manifesting in that sale. And I use that tag. Also, you mentioned numerology because numerologically it worked out to 11. So I
Yeah.
really liked that. And so I
Oh,
went with the
nice.
real KristaLyn to go with
Right,
that. And
right.
I'm on TikTok and Instagram. I have a
Okay.
really good time there. I actually take the transits and give the planets a character and I do skits to express what the transit is like. So it's again very accessible to someone who may not be well versed in astrology. I have been studying Hellenistic astrology, so 5,000 years worth of astrological understanding. I've been doing that since 2012 probably. And I put all of that into these skits. So I make it accessible, entertaining, but also I'm very on top of the integrity of it. I try my best.
It sounds very unique and interesting. So I'll put that link down in the description below the video so
I
somebody can
appreciate
check
it.
that out. Do you
Yeah.
do individual readings for people?
I do. It's my favorite thing in the
Okay.
entire world because I can be face to face and just tell you everything about how amazing you are. So I
That's
absolutely.
awesome.
Mhm.
Awesome. And Hellenistic, would that be like a Greek background?
Yeah, so it's the Greco-Roman era.
Hmm.
Much of it took place in Egypt, of course.
Right.
So you have a lot of Egyptian writers that were the original kind of source texts that we refer back to. I mean, it goes back to as many things do in Hermetic practices.
Right.
Um, um, gosh, Hermes Trismegistus is credited as like the source of astrology and many other things as far as those arts go. But you have a lot of source texts that I've gone into in depth, and I
Sounds
really
very interesting.
I have to hold myself back from the
Yeah.
enthusiasm because I will go into jargon very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually fairly complex to a novice. And in my opinion. I mean, you look at some of this and it's like, whoa, this is something you need to study. It's something
Yeah.
you have to be passionate about.
It's kind of like learning to read code for a website.
Yeah,
It's its own data language of
yeah,
sorts. And
yeah,
there are multiple ways that you can approach the reading and interpretation of it. So
right,
knowing what you're going in to find helps understand how you're going to navigate that chart.
right, right. Super interesting. So
Mm.
tell me, so you had the childhood experience,
Mhm.
you learned energy healing, you've had experiences. Anything else we need to know about how you've gotten from point A to Z at this point?
Yeah, there's a really important part of the process that I think a lot of people skip because it's the one you're most afraid of, I think, when you're navigating this process, and it is allowing yourself to not believe in anything for a period of time, to
Oh,
just kind of wipe the slate clean. And I got to this point when my life had gotten so hard that I couldn't imagine why a God would allow this to happen if they were loving. So I was like, you know what? Until I understand you better and until I understand me better, we're done. So I took a period of time and just worked on me. And then once I felt safe again, once I felt like I knew who I was, like I knew what was important to me, I opened back up to, okay, what's out there and
right,
how do I prioritize the way I
right,
walk this path?
right,
And then you find that God or source or the divine, however you introduce yourself, they meet you instead of you having to fit into a box that someone told you is the only way to
right,
find them.
right.
So for me, and this is why I was asked to stop being a Sunday school teacher, because when the kids were saying, I don't know if I believe in God, I said, question it. Ask him to show you something. Ask for a little bit of proof. I've done it multiple times. If you're frustrated, get frustrated. Many times I believe that God uses, I call them God smacks. So you'll get little hints, but if you ignore those hints, you're going to get a nudge. And if you ignore the nudge, you're going to get smacked eventually. And that's the only way that you finally
Right,
stop and check
right.
in
Yeah,
with the bigger picture.
yeah,
So it helps to ask, am I on track? And that's one of the ways I love astrology, tarot, those things that I think are really good self checks
yeah.
for, am I on the right path? What am I not seeing because I'm fixated over here? It's very
I'm
important.
grateful you said that because many of my friends and I check in, multiple times a
Mhm.
day. Am I on track?
Yeah.
Should I be doing something? I'm not. Most of the time we're on our path because we're
Mhm.
we're using our guidance or intuition, whatever it might be. We're on track. And of course we have to live, we have to do the mundane things in life and all that, but we're on our path the way we should be. And there is no should. There is
Mhm.
no one way or right way, but the highest and best way, let's say.
Yeah.
But when you're so absorbed with technology and all the things you got on your to-do list and you're running around like a chicken without a head, you don't have time to like go inside, if you will, and,
Mhm.
and feel whether you are fulfilled, whether you're on the right track or not.
Yeah,
You're
it's a
just on
survival mode.
yeah.
Mhm.
What was that? I interrupted.
Oh, no, sorry. I think I interrupted you, but it's a survival mode in and of
Exactly.
itself that you end up being in because you have to keep pace with some kind of
Exactly.
societal standard that doesn't actually exist. There is no
Exactly.
person that embodies what society wants us to go for because it's an
Right.
amalgamation anyway.
Right.
So it's kind of impossible to meet that standard. And once you realize that, you can kind of shatter that false deity of
Right.
sorts
Right.
and allow
Right.
yourself to just make your own mold.
Right. I love it. I love it. I think that's what impressed me about you when I talked to you way back when a few years ago. I think we talked on the phone initially,
Mhm.
and you just seem very like together. You just kind of you have your sense of purpose and you're moving along your path, and I really like that. It
Thank you.
a lot of us are bouncing around trying things and we're like half crazed, and it's really nice to see somebody that's really progressing in the way that suits them the best, I guess I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. I have always had a plan.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the reasons that I ended up pursuing different things was because at about the age of 27, right around when in our lives we hit what's called the Saturn Return, and it's one of the speed bumps in life where you have to really assess where you're at, where you want to go, and start building the life you want rather than the one you've had so far. I ran out of plan, and that was very uncomfortable for me. So that was when I was like, you know what? I'm going to take these two things I love, I'm going to put them together, and I'm going to go with that and see how it works. So I started following the fun, which to me is how you know you're in alignment. When things are fun and you're not feeling concerned or frustrated, when every day you wake up and you choose what you're doing.
Right.
That is your alignment. And so I started choosing my days. And sometimes the next day was the same as the first, but I chose it. It was me that got to decide that.
Right.
And 15 books later, with a way that I'm helping people do this as well, and kind of saving the world one book at a time
Right.
through all sorts of different experiences, I can't think of a better way to be an expression of the divine in my own self.
I love that too. I love it when you wake up and like when you're excited about a project, you literally will roll out of bed. Like this is me, right to the computer, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And it's like I haven't eaten, I haven't done all the normal things, but I'm so engrossed with what I'm doing. I love that. And sometimes it'll be 2 or 3 in the afternoon. I'm like, maybe I should eat and get out of my PJs, I'm not like that every day, especially now. But I love that feeling, that sense of purpose and that excitement about something, the passion.
Waking up and saying, I get to do this today, and letting that be your first thought is to me one of the greatest affirmations that you can have in the morning is I get to do this thing because I've decided, I've chosen it.
Yeah. That's really the way life is supposed to be. We're supposed to get to choose what we work on and really go full tilt and love it. And then we're done. We're done. We go to the next thing. And that's the way we grow and learn. But, so tell me about how you started writing. Like,
well, I didn't have a lot of friends. So I grew up, I'm neurodivergent and did not realize that for quite a long time. But, when you only function with half a brain, I guess you're allowed to be a little bit neurodivergent. So I found that most of my relating and my ability to communicate and express came in the form of writing. And even just the act of writing was a very meditative thing for me. So, in school, if we had a punishment, I prayed that it was writing lines because that I could have fun with. And usually I wasn't the one that got us in trouble anyway. So it was like, I wasn't punished. So I started doing that, and then we would get assigned, write a story, do this. And I found writing stories is a really great way to get out of the world.
Right.
And so from there, I started writing the stories that I wanted to be in. And I started writing stories that I wanted to really get into theme and share with people this understanding that I couldn't express in a way that would maintain someone's attention if I just talked. So I started telling it in the form of a story. Like, what is it like to be a spirit guide for someone who isn't really conscious of their spirit guide's experience and doesn't connect with them, but wants to? How can I know what they're going through? So I wrote a book series on that's ongoing and releasing right now. Just all sorts of things. I have a couple nonfiction books as well that are more instructive, because I know some people learn best that way. And so I'm writing my third nonfiction book right now, and I'm progressing with a series on the end of the world from a spirit guide's perspective.
Ooh, I love it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So pretty much all of your books have a spiritual theme.
Yeah, I can't avoid it. If you saw my astrology chart, you'd be like, oh yeah.
Yeah. And I know we had talked about this before. So you had a series, and you're also doing some classes right now, or I guess a workshop or seminar.
Yeah. So I have a business partner who is also highly intuitive and also a writer. And we had the same idea at the same time, met in a program together, wanted to do it differently and in our style. And we ended up partnering up in 2020. Now we run a 4-month book writing mentorship, where we help you write a fiction book that is designed through the hero's journey to help people unconsciously heal through that theta brainwave where we go when we meditate.
Right.
And so you consciously write using, I actually call it the High-Vibe Hero's Journey, which is one of my nonfiction books.
Okay.
And this is kind of our course curriculum with a little bit more added in to the actual course.
Okay.
And so you write a book based on your experience that you've gone through and help people heal through that are also on that journey, but they do it in story. So it automatically gets them in a meditative visionary state, and it helps walk them through a safe space of this relatable but safe distanced kind of therapy is what it ends up being. And it also helps them tap into their own intuitions. Once you get in that safe space, you can unlock your own ability.
So they're basically writing, kind of their experience, but they write it in a fiction way. So it's interesting and it's fun. it's safe, as you said, but it's also helpful to other people.
Yeah, and it's less fictional memoir. It's more the theme and the emotion is what we really tap into. The feeling that you want to help your reader understand.
Right.
That's going to help them walk out of whatever darkness they might have found themselves in.
Right. And so it's a 4-month program. Is it, I'm assuming, online? And
Yes. Yeah.
how many times a week do you meet with them or whatever? How does that work?
So we meet twice a week, but we only run the program about 3 or 4 times a year with Emily and myself actually being your one-on-one. So you have us there with you the entire time, really intimately with only 10 people at a time.
Right.
And we walk you through your story. Yeah. We want it to be a very personal experience. We want you to feel seen. So when we take in clients, we're actually kind of in the middle of a cohort right now. We'll be taking pitches again for people who have this story on their heart and are ready to share it. You get to pitch us, and then we meditate over, can we serve this story? Are we the right people for this? And we help give you guidance. Even if you aren't in the program, we'll guide you to what we feel is the next best step for you anyway. So you have a path forward.
I love that process. I love it, because why take somebody on that they won't be successful, or they're not going to get it or whatever, and you can't help. It's great.
So they're in a situation, so you want to give them at least the next step, even if it's not with you.
Yeah, that's perfect. And where would someone go to find out more about that program?
Yeah, so the program is called the Forgotten Storytellers. And so we actually have ForgottenStorytellers.com, and you can find out everything there. And of course, I share about it on my social media whenever we're accepting pitches and things like that as well. So,
all right. So I'll put that link in the description box as well below.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
So let's talk about all your books.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, I know that we had talked, like I said before, I think it was in the lobby of the expo. I'm usually half crazy when I'm running an expo, so Lord only knows what came out of my mouth. But can you kind of show the viewer some of your books and maybe give a summary, or maybe even what inspired you to write that particular book, or even in that style or way?
Yeah. So obviously we have the nonfiction books. This is how to handle anxiety, because if you get anxiety out of the way, then you can tap into your intuition a little bit better. So this is a nonfiction book, imagining anxiety as like being in a car accident, and it walks you through that metaphor.
Ooh,
You have Writing the High-Vibe Hero's Journey, which is spirituality for writers.
Right.
But my favorite series that I'm working on right now is the Shifted series. So the Shifted series has currently 2 novellas. We've got these guys. And then the first book and the second book is actually heading into production today, which is fantastic.
All right.
And that is the end of the world from a spirit guide's perspective. So it's really talking about the politics of the higher planes, how this actually works. Is a demon a demon? Is there as much duality as we sometimes think there is, or is it kind of a gray area? What about that? How do we interact? And what's the relationship between them and us? Do we matter? Is it a symbiosis kind of situation? Do we affect them, and do they affect us? So it's kind of like creating this partnership awareness with the complete picture, rather than saying it's afterlife and current life, and that this is just a school that we're learning in, which it is, but there's more to it than that I've intuited and that I've picked up on in my experience. And I've been, of course, since I was 10, I've been doing this for 22 years now. So I have some things that have come up and that other people have resonated with. So I put them in this book in the form of a kind of dystopian story, or like a immediately pre-dystopian story.
Loving it. Loving the whole concept.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. And what else? What other? I think you said you've done 15 books already.
Yeah. So
it's quite impressive.
Yeah, I feel like I have like this little Jenga tower over here. The other book that I think is really another one of my favorites is called Pure Fire. This is more your Tolkien, Narnia-esque kind of book. It's medieval. There are crystals, and it's really just about understanding every person you meet as a unique individual, even if they look massively different. There's something underneath that's binding you together, and there's an ability that you have that contributes to a society, and you have your place in that. And it's just a very unique piece that only you can fill. And just, kind of really understanding that we can have everything we need to feel safe and also be part of a greater community, being valued an individual, but a part of the whole as well.
Right.
So just loving everyone as well as yourself is kind of a theme that comes into that, and just how to express yourself as part of that whole.
That seems to be a theme that I'm getting a lot lately is loving yourself. All right.
Yeah.
So, we've heard the saying, you can't love someone more than you love yourself. And most of us, like when we do something wrong, we beat ourselves up. We internally, we're just so negative and horrible to ourselves. How would someone go about loving themselves?
Yeah. And so there's another angle that I always like to think about. I spend so much of my day just thinking about the world. But, that phrase is true. And the way that I've found that resonates with me of understanding how and why it's true is because you can't love someone more than you love yourself, because you don't know how.
Right.
Until you understand what love feels like, you don't know
Right.
how to give something you've never received.
Right.
So if you can start by learning how to love yourself, you get practice. And then you can extend that to someone else, because you know what good love feels like. Otherwise, you might think love is something and it ends up not being aligned at the very least with another person. So the first thing, the simplest thing I would recommend is, of course, affirmations. And that's not just because you're telling yourself something nice every day. It's because you're reprogramming your mind to value yourself. And so there is this whole thing of core beliefs, and one of the theta healing technique is one of my favorites, because you're going in and you're pulling and replacing a belief with something healthy and aligned for you.
Right.
And they are always in the form of affirmations, because that's how our unconscious works. So speaking in the present tense, in the affirmative, is going to teach your brain, kind of like you would, singing a song to a child. You're teaching them this warm and fuzzy thing, because you really are healing your inner child. You're doing this reprogramming on 7-year-old or younger you, because that's when you would have integrated these things most of the time to begin with.
Right.
So affirmations and repeating them gives yourself permission to make it normal. And I think that's why it's healthy to repeat them. And, a lot of people will repeat them 7 times. That's a great number. It's a very structural, supportive number. It's a very kind of sacred number. It's got a lot of significance I could go into, but in and of itself, 7 times is also just enough times for you to almost get bored saying it, because now you've accepted it.
Right.
So I really like that as well. You kind of just gradually walk yourself into believing this great thing about yourself that is true.
Awesome. I love that. Where would someone find out more about your books? Do you have a separate website for that, or?
So if you search my name on Amazon, they'll all come up. I do have my website, which is KristaLyn.Vetovich.com. It's the same as it's spelled on my books. And so on there, you'll be able to look at talismans I've made. You'll be able to work with me as a psychic medium or your personal astrologer I do, which is really fun. Everything I do is on that website, but you can also go to Amazon and just search. If you search KristaLyn, it's fortunately quite a unique name, so it comes up pretty quickly.
Well, I will also put that link below. And I haven't talked to you in probably a year and a half, but everything you talk about, it's just so spot on. You're a great communicator. You're enthusiastic. You're so in touch with everything. It's very exciting to see. And you're making great progress, helping so many people.
I want to save the world. That is my goal. Yeah.
Do you have any tips for someone that, let's call them, a mainstream, a regular person, that someone that, may have had some experiences or whatever, or wants to awaken to their spiritual nature a little bit more quickly than they are? And again, you can't force anything ever, but are there things that could help them that you would recommend?
Yes. So I'm a big proponent of doing research. If you're curious about something, find a source, read it, listen to the audiobook, listen to a podcast. Podcasts are so useful. I actually host a podcast with Emily, my business partner, called The Alchemist Inkwell, and we just cover everyday magic stuff to help you realize how magical your normal day is and give you permission to enter into that world. But also, if you pursue this research and you start going into, where can I find out more about this thing, you're going to find other people who share the interest. So then surrounding yourself with friends and supportive connections, it's going to help it feel more normal to talk about it. It's going to let you become more fluent in that language so that you can decide if that's the language you want to speak. So for me, it's pursuing the sources that help you understand why you would believe something or help you understand why you wouldn't want to believe that thing. Makes you feel very sure about yourself and gives you that confidence to build even further. And then finding the people that also speak that same light language that you do.
Right. I love that. I always thought that the value in attending a class is not just for the information. It's really because I learn so much from talking with other people. Their stories anchor it in for me. So sometimes there's a concept that I'm dancing around. Somebody will, say something and it clicks for me. And I love that. It's so exciting.
Yeah. Well, and I attend astrological conferences, of course, because I'm obsessed. And my favorite thing about them is, yes, the lectures were so valuable and helped me really expand my understanding. And it's the connections, the friends I now have, where I live in middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. So there weren't a lot of people around me who were talking about crystals or psychics or mediums or astrology, which I could talk about all day, every day. Now I have monthly Zoom meetings with my friends in Canada or Amsterdam or wherever, and we can text each other all the time. One of them's in Chicago. We were catching up today, and it's when you speak astrology, you end up speaking in transits and moon cycles and all those things. So being able to say, man, I have a Jupiter retrograde story for you, you automatically go in and say, oh my gosh, what happened? I don't know how this affects you. And so you cut the small talk and go straight into this heart connection, which is great.
I love that. It's a little jargon, astrologer jargon.
Yeah, it's the people who get you. It's like, going to Comic-Con, only with us, it's astrology. And Comic-Con.
So I really believe that the stories that people tell are so valuable because that's the way we learn. And of course, we may need the structure of a class or a workshop or whatever, because that gives us the information. It tells us maybe the what or whatever, but not the why or the how or whatever. So for me, sometimes when I'm learning something that's new or hard, I'll listen to the, content and I'm like, I don't get it. So it's like dancing around, but I have to bebop around life a little bit. And then it clicks into my brain somehow. Or somebody will say something, I'll see it in a book or hear a phrase, and then it anchors in. And I love that. It's just so exciting, especially when it's something important.
And that's the helpful thing with story as well, is you'll have this concept that life has probably introduced to you, but when you can relate to a character in a story, and it's not the pressure of, I have to understand this, why am I not getting this? It's, oh, that character just learned that thing. Wait a second. And then you get that aha moment through that connection of just understanding someone else's experience and relating it to your own. So bebopping around your life and that of a character's or friends or
There's two fiction books I always recommend to people that are spiritually oriented. Like, they're great books. The story is great, but you get so much out of it spiritually. And one is The Art of Racing in the Rain. I don't know if you've ever read that one.
I've heard of it.
Oh, it's beautiful. And they have made it into a movie. They kind of took a couple shortcuts. The movie is not horrible, but the book is far better. The other one I like is Breakfast with Buddha. I don't know if you Breakfast with Buddha, then you have Lunch with Buddha, Dinner with Buddha, Golfing with God. There's a whole slew of books that are so fascinating, beautifully written, and they all kind of dovetail in together. All of this author's book, Murillo, Ronald Murillo, I think is the author's name. I can't remember, but fabulous books. Yeah, and I always recommend them. Yeah. So any other tips you might give a person that wants to progress a little bit faster than they feel that they are?
Journal.
Ooh,
I highly recommend journaling and doing like a card pull or something every day that allows the divine to speak to you. And then you can go about finding validations for that. I know, again, my business partner, Emily, one of her core concepts is ask for validation from your guides and then let them connect with you. You sort of build that relationship. Consciously saying, hey, I understand you're there. I want to meet you, and allowing that to happen. And so in journaling, you can say, this happened today, and find meaning in it. You can pull a card, understand what that card means, learning cards at the same time, which is always helpful, but you can understand what that card means and then set your intention for the day based on that, which is going to help you realize the synchronicities. For me, it was, because I have an affinity for this, but learning astrology helped me find the cogs behind the machine in a sense, with the planets going around in their cycles.
Right.
And so I started noticing that correlates with this. This was supposed to happen, and it made me feel this way. I'm allowed to feel this way. What am I allowed to feel tomorrow? What am I allowed to feel in any day? So you end up having this internal dialogue with yourself, and then just being able to journal it helps you declare it and own it a little bit, even if you're not comfortable speaking about it with family and friends at first. Writing it out makes it real and makes it tangible and puts it out there for you, so it feels like you're standing in your power with it more.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Thank you.
Anything else that you'd like to add to your story here?
So
I mean, we could talk for hours, I'm sure.
I know. But just that the story is constantly unfolding.
Yes.
I am surprised, and my faith and my wonder in the world is renewed truly every day. And I look forward to it. And I think that that is definitely a helpful mindset to take when you're on the journey, is that there is no end point. It's just a step further and a step further and a step further. And that is not failure of failure to arrive. It is the next step in the journey. It's the sequel to the tale. It's however you want to view it, as this honor of being able to continue on the adventure. And that's really helpful to me.
It's just expansion, like embracing the expansion, embracing the growth. Like we can choose a life where we're sitting on the couch eating chips and watching TV and just taking in what someone else is dishing out. We can experience life. There's ups and there's downs. We learn from the downs. We do it better the next time. And we pursue what we're passionate about and see where that leads us. I love that part the most.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time. I look forward to speaking with you again. And I will put all the links that I can dig up in the description for those that might like to find out more about you.
Yeah. And there is on my website, I have a little mailing list. It's mostly just because I do astrology every month and I send out free stuff for it. So if you want free astrology, that comes along with a video of me explaining the astrology every month. You can sign up on my mailing list there, and August is already ready to go.
So. Oh, yay. I'm glad you said that, because everyone's going to want to do that now. So
I hope so. It's very helpful, and I try to make things feel normal and tangible and useful. This is what you might see in the headlines. This is how you can actually do something in your life with it.
I love it. It's practical, and it applies to your life, your practical life. I love that. Yeah. Excellent.
I love a grounded approach.
Excellent. I do too, because if the theory is all great, but unless you can use it, it doesn't do you as much good.
And it helps you learn and understand it better when you can actually do something with it.
Exactly.
So, learning through experience.
Yeah. I appreciate all your help and what you're doing for other people. It's so exciting.
Thank you.
And I know we'll be talking again soon.
I'll look forward to it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Take care, KristaLyn.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.